Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up, what was it like to serve in Iraq? We talk with returned Idaho troops about their experience and their re-entry to life here in Idaho, next on Dialogue. Good evening, I'm Marcia Franklin. They missed holidays, birthdays, and even births, but now they're home. Several thousand Idaho troops have now served in Iraq. Tonight we talk with 4 of those who have returned. Joining me are 2 members of the 116th Brigade Combat Team of the Idaho Army National Guard, First Sergeant Stan Clinton and Specialist Chris Chesick. Welcome to you and welcome home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They and their compatriots in the Idaho Guard spent nearly a year in Iraq. Also joining me are 2 members of the Marine Forces Reserve, Staff Sergeant Nathan Spaulding and Sergeant Joseph Gutierrez. They and other members of Charlie Company, 4th Tank Battalion, 4th Marine Division of the Marine Forces Reserve, spent 7 months in Iraq. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as usual, you can call us on our toll-free line, 1-800-973-9800. Well, first let's do a quick round robin. I want to hear what the most, what struck you most when you came home. What was most surprising about re-entry?
The nicest thing that I found when I got back home was the air smelled good. You know, there's a lot of poo-poo running in the streets, and they've got oil fires all over there, and the air just smelled so good, and the country looked so clean, and it was just nice getting back and seeing my family.
Being able to breathe. I'll bet I know what your answer might be. Chris, what was the most surprising thing about coming home for you?
Oh, absolutely, my daughter. It's just, I certainly agree with First Sergeant Clinton, but just to come home to my first
new
child,
daughter.
Brand new daughter, who was born the night I flew into Iraq. So to get to meet her was just outstanding.
And Nathan Spaulding of the Marines, what was the feeling or most surprising thing when you stepped off the plane or the first day you woke up?
I'd say just the overall reception that we received from the people here in Boise and our families. It was just amazing to see our, I have 2 sons, just to see them, it was great.
And Joseph Gutierrez?
For my son, and like once again what the First Sergeant said, just the color. There's not too much color in Iraq. It's just brown and brown. So
I think you were the one who was
green.
I think you were the one who's telling me too that you went away with your wife to just celebrate, and there was like a sauna or a hot tub at the hotel, and you're like, oh, I cannot get near heat. Too hot, huh?
Too hot.
So the coolness felt good.
Coolness felt real good.
Well, let's before we get into some specific questions, I want to put up a map to explain to people where you were. And there it is, and we can see that the towns of Al-Muqtadiya and Baqaba on the right-hand side are where the 116th initially went to, and then moved on up to Kirkuk, which is more north in the Kurdish part of Iraq. And for the Marines, we need to look over towards Hit. Is that how you pronounce it? Camp Hit?
It's actually pronounced Heat.
Heat.
Yes.
And probably appropriate for how hot it was, huh? Camp Heat. And of course, there were other Marines serving in other areas, but this is where you were located. So I wanted to give people a locator. I want to talk about the various duties that you had and show some photos. And first and foremost, I want to talk about the elections, because the 116th visit tour of duty, I should say, was bracketed by elections at the front end and the back end. And here we see ballot boxes, which is very interesting to me, just sitting out in the open. Sergeant?
This was the January election, the very first election that Iraq had in over 30 years, and those are the ballots that were delivered there at FOB Normandy down there at Muqtadiya. And we were responsible for guarding those ballots and making sure that they were kept safe till they got to the voters.
And Chris Chesick, you were in Baqaba doing a similar assignment. Did you find that the people there were excited about the elections, or was it kind of a mixed reception?
It was very mixed. One town we worked in was very cold about their elections, didn't want anything to do with them, frankly. Another town, though, it was a party, it was a celebration. They were very happy to get out and vote.
Of course, another big thing that all of you did was go out on raids and look for suspected insurgents and weapons caches. And here, Sergeant Stan Clinton, we have what I believe is a map of Kirkuk on the ground.
You know, when we get the mission to go do a raid, the first thing we want to do is do a rehearsal so everybody knows what their part in this play is. And we lay these diagrams out on the ground, and that's a little section of the city that we're supposed to raid, the next night. So we go through that.
And the next picture, Chris, I believe is yours. These are push pins, are they not? And what are they illustrating?
Those are marking everything from kidnappings to IEDs, roadside bombs, ambushes, just a whole variety of different incidents.
The next picture we have shows our military, it looks like, trying to get information from a father, perhaps, about what he might know about insurgents. Is that correct?
Yes, just talking to one of the many houses we'd go through on a raid, just talking to the head of the household to see if they know any information and to see if we can find anything in the house.
How are you, how do you know that the information you're getting is correct? I mean, I assume if people have kind of fights with each other internally, they might say, hey, he did it, he's a bad guy, go get him. And it may just be an internal fight.
A lot of times it is. We had a couple of those internal fights there with the family, but we rely a lot on our interpreters, and we go with the police, and the police are familiar with a lot of these people, and they know whether they're lying or whether they're not.
Next picture shows some soldiers actually inside a house. And I think what's interesting here is, we think of the houses as being very poor looking, perhaps, but this looks like a upper middle class home almost.
That's a very rich home.
A very rich home. And as I understand it, you would try to take an Iraqi along with you. For what reason?
Well, we always tried to work with either the Iraqi army or the police, and additionally had interpreters with us. We were really there to support them. They were the ones who were supposed to be going into the homes. So we were really supposed to be there more as a support unit, letting them sort of take the reins a little bit more.
Now, did Marines go? They didn't go inside houses so much as the 116th did, did they?
Actually, Sergeant Gutierrez and I didn't. That wasn't what we were over there to do. But the Marines that we were attached to, that's what they would do. They served the same type of missions. They would conduct raids and search houses, things like that.
Well, we're going to get into some of the duties that you had as well. I'm going to finish with this section here, though. The next picture we have is of a suspected insurgent being led away, and I'm wondering what happens to, say, this person or anybody else? What's next? They get taken and they get put in the custody of the Iraqi police, and then anyone knows what happens?
We worked with 4 police stations while we were in Iraq, or in Kirkuk, the Adala, Magdad, Domes, and ESU. Most of our prisoners went to ESU, and they were processed through the judicial system in Kirkuk.
Did you ever worry that perhaps somebody was inappropriately picked up, or worry about how the Iraqi police were going to treat them?
Yes, always. We found out, if you were a little bit humane, then the people, they picked up on that. And when they found out we were there to treat them humanely and look after their interests, we got a lot more information from them.
But once you hand them over to the Iraqi police, you don't really have a say in it after that, do you?
No.
Okay. And we can see here another suspected insurgent being led away. And prior to that, there was a shot of what you were looking for, like false IDs and things like that.
Yes, if they've got false IDs, and a lot of them are pretty proud of the things they do over there, they'll record them on CDs and they'll have them on their computers and stuff, so we always try to pick that information up.
And you did, in fact, find caches of mortars, of guns. How successful do you feel these raids were? Was it just the tip of the iceberg?
In some ways, what was probably more successful was just finding not intentional, but just piles of ammunition out in the foothills for us. There's just munitions all over the country, so for us to be able to go out there, find them, secure that site, and then dispose of those was great to help prevent anyone from taking those and making bombs out of them.
Now, you mentioned the Iraqi police, and clearly, eventually the American troops are going to be gone, can't do this, and it'll be up to the Iraqi troops to do this. So another part of the mission, critical part of the mission, was training Iraqi police. And I believe we have a shot of some Iraqi police standing around. 2,000, I believe, more American troops are being sent over to train Iraqi police because this is considered to be such an important job.
When we worked with them, they just tried so hard to do good. They were a lot of fun to work with. Their hearts were there. They tried, and you just show them just a few things, and they would practice what you taught them.
I understand it's kind of varies from region to region how well trained they are, and sometimes there's actually insurgents that have gotten into the police themselves.
That's certainly probable at some point, yes.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to the Marines. We don't want to leave you out, of course. You were in tanks doing some heavy-duty support work for active military. You were supporting a unit out of Ohio, is that right? Regiment?
Yes, 325 Battalion out of Ohio.
And which saw a lot of casualties, did it not?
They did. They saw a lot of casualties.
So let's talk about being inside these tanks. And Joseph, I believe we have a picture of you. It was pretty darn hot, was it not?
Yeah, it was pretty hot. Just pretty much put everything on and soak it all up with sweat. That's what it was.
How did you handle that? I mean, I read the articles in the paper about, you know, what was Chris, this is you drinking water. I mean, I assume all you can do is just drink as much water as you can.
Just down it as much as you can. You may not think you need it, but just gotta drink it out of habit now.
How many hours would you be in a tank at one time?
It depended on the mission. I mean, we'd be there for days. We'd be there for a few hours, depending on what we were used for and what we had going at the time.
They were not the easiest things to move around. As we can see here, this one trying to cross a ditch in mud. They're huge. So a lot of it must have been working with the tanks themselves. Here's one stuck in sand. Frustrating work, or?
Actually, it was kind of, you learn as you go. Stay away from the dark sand. Learn that pretty fast. It's real unreliable terrain. There's water underneath the ground in various places, and slightest bit of dark sand, you just sunk as soon as you got off the road. So.
How often were you taking fire in the tanks?
In the tanks, the tanks right where we were at, you can hear the tanks for miles and miles. So anytime we would roll into town, you know, it's like thunder. They could hear us before we would get there usually.
And scatter.
They'd scatter.
And your job essentially was to do what for the 325th?
We were there as a quick reaction force, just to be kind of the heavy hitters when there was a lot of insurgent activity in the area that we were in, and they like to have us there to kind of scare the insurgents away. Insurgents knew, basically, they see a tank, just kind of leave us alone.
And the next picture is to illustrate that not only are the tanks difficult to work with, but Humvees can be too.
Certainly.
And Chris, I think this was a particular incident that you were involved in, yes?
Yes, this is where I learned how top-heavy the up-armored Humvees can be.
And it flipped, and we shouldn't make light of it, because in fact there have been numerous casualties in this manner just from operating vehicles in unknown vehicles in unknown territory.
Absolutely.
And it's a serious, serious problem.
And luckily, in this incident, we took the right safety precautions, so everyone literally walked away, thank goodness.
Well, the next shot that we're going to segue to is fortunately, folks walked away from this as well. But this is an example of what an IED can do to that type of vehicle. And amazing, just a week later, this was back in action, this vehicle, I believe.
Correct. This is actually hit by a VB IED, which is a car bomb. So a very large explosive, but it's testament to the up-armored Humvees just how well it can survive a very large explosion, that all 5 of the crew walked away, one with minor injuries, but that was really it.
Were any of your vehicles in your unit hit by IEDs as well?
As far as our tanks, no. Just for the same reason they stayed away from us. But the grunts that we'd go out patrolling with, or we'd back up as support, they would occasionally have a few get too close.
And here's an example. I mean, the crater, Sergeant Clinton, is not that large from one of these, but that can kill. I mean, it's not like it's a huge hole.
Yeah, that's very hard ground that he's standing in, so that's a pretty good sized bomb that went off.
And the next couple of scenes that we have show the destruction. Now, it's my understanding, Sergeant Gutierrez, that the insurgents are getting a lot smarter about how they're putting these IEDs together, even with up-armored vehicles and such.
They are. One of the things they're starting to do now is pressure plates on both sides of the IED, so that way they're guaranteed a belly shot. You got to have to step on both sides for it to pop on you. And that
it's so hot when it comes through that it can literally just burn out the inside of the vehicle.
It can. It depends on exactly where it does hit.
Sergeant Clinton, you were quoted in a Washington Post article actually talking about how you can now just roll over one of those little rubber tubes on the ground like we used to have when we went into gas stations. It said ding ding or whatever, and they figured out how to make that be the trigger.
Those they were starting to use those there towards the end of our tour there in Kirkuk. The last couple of months, they were using those there in Kirkuk on us.
And I believe also in that same article there was a quote either from you or somebody else saying, you know, when we originally came into Iraq, we were fighting an enemy we could see. Now it could be in a cardboard box on the side of the road.
Yes.
And what is that like to not know, you know, the enemy could be anywhere. It could be hiding under a bush.
It's certainly nerve-wracking to say the least, because as you're driving down the road, you have to be aware of every curb, every barrier, every pile of trash, every pothole could contain something inside of it.
Staff Sergeant Spaulding, the next picture, I believe, is of you, and this was not from an IED, but you were wounded right in your campsite.
That's correct. I was unfortunate enough to get hit by a mortar one afternoon, so it's not as common as IEDs, but they use indirect fire. We were harassed daily, sometimes multiple times per day.
The next picture shows how things were, essentially a little somewhat insecure, unsecured, when you were hit. There's just an open area behind you. And you're, what, top right there? Or?
I'm actually top center.
Top center, okay. So is that where you were hit, basically in that location or near there?
Just from where I'm standing, it would be to my right, about 25 meters is where I was.
The next picture shows the action that you took after that to secure the area. And I put those bunkers up. I mean, it still really seems exposed to me out there in the middle of nowhere.
It was. What we did after all the mortar attacks that we had, hardened it up like that, it was pretty safe. You know, we were flaks and Kevlars all the time, and we felt pretty safe.
And you have a Purple Heart from that, and how are you doing?
Great. No, nothing but a couple scars to show from it. So,
let's take a couple phone calls. Speaking of that, Sergeant Butler and Emmett. Sergeant, go ahead, please.
Hey, First Sergeant, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent, Sergeant Butler. How are you?
You look really good up there.
Good.
I haven't seen you since you've been back. You look good.
Well, thank you. You sound good.
I just want to let you know it's glad to see you home, and I'd like to see those devil dogs up there too. They look good, you know.
No place like home.
Sergeant
Exactly.
Butler, I believe you're a Purple Heart recipient yourself?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in.
Hey, no problem. I just wanted to say hi to that First Sergeant up there.
We're glad that you're back. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
All right.
Couple pictures I want to show before we moved into some other issues, and these are of the interpreters that you worked with, critical to your mission, all of you, I assume. This first picture is somebody that you knew and is no longer with us?
Yes, that's one of our interpreters. His name was Arif. He was a regular Army Iraqi soldier during the Kuwait thing. Extremely nice gentleman. He was assassinated one morning when he went home.
We have a couple other pictures of interpreters as we talk about their importance. Anyone else want to weigh in on the importance of the Iraqi interpreters that you work with?
I think it's especially crucial up in Kirkuk, where you're dealing with so many different kinds of people, Kurds, Turkish people, Arabs. Communication is just essential for just trying to get some of the most basic ideas across, so they're absolutely crucial.
Well, let's take a look at a little bit of life, so to speak, in the barracks. We have a shot here of one of the barracks. You can put that up. Who lived there?
That's where Alpha Company lived while we were in FOB Normandy down there at Miqdadiyah.
Okay.
Home sweet home.
The next shot is, I guess you tried to make it as homey as possible when you were there. This third shot, Marines in bunks, looks like you are ready for action there. It's a lot of incoming and being prepared even when you're asleep to have to get up and go at it.
It's one of those days we probably got harassed a good 3 or 4 times, and it was just easier to keep it on than take it off and put it back on. So
this next shot gives an indication of how extremely hot it was off the thermometer. And the next shot we see some folks taking advantage of the little bit of water that there was there. You had to use that bottled water to take a bath?
Actually, we're shaving his head there, but
Yeah.
a lot of times we would use him to take a shower.
These next two shots I find phenomenal. Sergeant Gutierrez or Staff Sergeant Spaulding, if you could explain what we're seeing here.
That was early May in Al Saad Airfield. Just an amazing sandstorm that blew in. Never seen anything like it in my life. Had to snap a couple pictures.
It is amazing. And the next shot, somebody actually standing in that. The whole sky turns orange, Sergeant Gutierrez?
yes, it amazes the mind once you think it's going to be just black, but it comes in and just puts a hint of orange all around, and it's like fog, orange fog, and you can't open your eyes that much because it'll get there, sting pretty bad.
Let's take another phone call. Matt from Caldwell. Matt, go ahead, please.
You know how, I want to know if it was scary over there in Iraq.
If it was scary. Okay, and how old are you, Matt?
I'm 11 years old.
Thank you so much for calling. Was it scary?
It was scary sometimes, but you know, it's scary here sometimes too. So.
You guys were saying coming on TV felt scary too. What about the rest of you? What did you do when you were scared? I assume all of you were scared at points.
There are so many times where it just never leaves your mind. As you're sitting there, maybe emailing your wife or something like that, you never know if a mortar's going to drop in your compound or if a sniper's going to take a shot at you. So it's just constant underlying little touch of fear at all times, for me at least.
Yeah, it's just, I can't really, you know, there's a few times when I remember being scared, but you just kind of always think about those Marines around you and remember that, you know, you have a job to do and they have a job to do and you're relying on each other.
Sergeant, any strategies you used when you were scared?
As First Sergeant said, to reiterate, it's there. You just got to push in the back of your mind. You got to remember what you're there for, what you're supposed to be doing, and what you need to be doing at the time, and not how scared you need to be.
Well, one of the ways that you, I assume, deal with being scared is to relax. And we have a couple of pictures of just hanging out and relaxing around the barracks, watching video games, eating too.
Looks good.
Let's show that, the relaxing around the barracks, watching video games. And I believe people set up gardens and mowed them. And you even have this picture of you with a kind of makeshift Christmas tree here, Sergeant.
Merry Christmas. That was a good one.
And then Chris Chesick, your wife sent you countdown candies.
Yes, she did.
Tootsie Roll for every day.
Mm-hmm.
As we rapidly move through, I want to show some street scene shots. This next scene is of palm trees, which I guess were particularly problematic for insurgents.
Yes, they would. We found a couple places where they were actually hiding weapons up in the palm trees, and they'd climb up and cut them down.
And next picture shows Humvee in a very crowded street. I mean, how any one of the vehicles or people around you could, you know, want to do some harm.
That was the thing, working in an urban environment, is that you're working with so many people through so many vehicles that you're absolutely right. At any moment, any one of them could try anything.
Now, as we run through a couple of other pictures here quickly, people were trying to bring things back to life. There were some shops that were trying to stay open. Is that right?
Yes.
And some shops, unfortunately, that had to be shuttered. Is that right, Sergeant Gutierrez? Once the Americans came through, I believe this next scene is of some shops that were closed up.
That's correct. It was about 20, 30 meters outside of one of the firm bases.
Let's wait till we get this shot up. Let's take the next shot here. Here we go.
It was about 20, 30 meters away from one of our firm bases, and that's too close for comfort for us, so we had to tell the vendors, you know, I need to move out until we're gone. So.
Next shot is of how people got their power. Very interesting, just stringing it up. And next shot is of a farmer. The people were still trying to farm the crop. Oh, I guess we don't have that. Sergeant, this is you with...
That was a picture of Saddam down in Fob Normandy down there, and as soon as Saddam fell, a lot of the locals done that to his pictures that were around there. The Americans didn't do that. The locals done that.
Well, we cannot end this program without some shots of the children. I've talked to all of you, and I know that meeting and interacting with the children was some of the high moments of your time here. They just surrounded you. They were not even afraid of the armored vehicles, were they?
No, they could be very aggressive at times, asking for candy. Actually, they'd ask for everything. Sometimes for my boots, my weapon, my helmet. But we're always happy to give out some toys and candy and try to brighten up their lives a little bit.
Here we see a boy reaching for a toy, another boy thanking you for a toy, and my understanding is after a while, since all the boys were getting toys, you wanted to give them to the girls too, right?
Well, the boys could be very aggressive, whereas the girls would often just stay in their courtyards, so we started making more of an effort to make sure that they got some toys as well.
I want to take one last call. Dustin in New Plymouth. Dustin, go ahead, please, and be brief if you can.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody on the panel and tell you how proud I am of all of you. It seems like the media likes to show a lot of the bad stuff that happened over there, but I was hoping that maybe some of you could talk about some of the good things that happened.
Great. Thanks so much for calling. As we wrap up here, I'd like each of you to tell me where you feel your successes were, because obviously the war is still ongoing.
We felt like we were successful in getting the cops back on track with keeping peace there, helping the people. 90% of the people, they just want to live and get on with life and enjoy their family, and we felt like we were successful on getting the police lined out and the regular Army.
And we just really did everything we could, my squad at least, to make sure that we let those kids know that we really cared about them, whether it was through candy, toys, a smile, a wave, whatever we could do.
My understanding is when the 116th left, there were quite a few tears among the folks in Kirkuk.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. You felt like you really bonded with some of the folks there?
I think so, to an extent, and again, certainly try to make an impact with the kids.
Now, the 101st Airborne came in after you. Do you think that will, I mean, the 116th is a guard force.
Correct.
You've led lives and done things in your life, and the 101st Airborne is different. It's active military.
Well, I think the Guard, you've got an older, more mature group of people that go over there, and I think they bond a little stronger with the people. They're not as wild, or I shouldn't say wild, but they're a little more focused than younger people.
Well, it
are.
will be interesting to see that area, what happens. And to the Marines, your successes, where do you feel strongly about?
Well, I really believe that we were able to allow the people in and around the town of Heat the ability to vote. We weren't there during the elections, but by us being there for the time we were there, we were able to put, 2 companies of Marines in the city, and they were able to stabilize that city, which was able to allow about 100,000 people to vote.
Sergeant Gutierrez?
One of the things that we did was we supported, I guess, a volunteer for the Iraqi forces, and we were expecting huge turnout, 300, 500 plus, and the day of, it showed up about 3 or 5 people. And at the time, we felt like, it's a complete failure, what are we doing this for? But if you think back to the beginning of this country, it was 3 or 4, 5 people that decided to stick their foot down and raise their voice. So it's kind of, you get 2 or 3 people starting believing, and then from there, it's a trickle effect. It starts getting bigger.
I want to thank all my guests. Of course, time is too short, and as we go, we want to take a look at some final scenes from Iraq.
Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family legacy of building the great state of Idaho. To order a copy of this program from Idaho Public Television, call our toll-free number or visit us on the World Wide Web.